Welcome, everyone. We should be live here in just a moment. We'll give everybody a few moments to join, and then we'll officially start our text reading show. It's our, I think, probably most important show since it deals with the basis for our beliefs, basically, right? Of course, shows about God and Jesus are more important in one sense, but without reading the texts, we don't really get to those things, even though we can identify things outside of the Bible, of course, consistent with it. But without our text readings, we wouldn't have anywhere near the kind of confidence and basis for our faith and understanding of history, present, or hope in the future that we have. And yet, it's our least popular video series, But I don't know that that's necessarily bad, right? Of course, we always hope that things that we see as important or more important than other shows, videos would be seen the same way. But, other people have different interests and not everybody can watch all the videos. But I think it's pretty clear just from a comparison of the view times of text readings with other, more exciting subjects, I guess, right? It's just still kind of confusing for me because we're reading the Bible, and I don't know, you would think people would still want to maybe glean some arguments or information about different subjects that we often discuss, whether it's the Trinity, the divine name, or other subjects, of course. But I don't know, there's something that just is more appealing to people about the more subject oriented videos, right? That don't have a lot of filler context material that we read. And I am also someone who doesn't really like to do video reading. I think voiceovers and reading things for just audio enjoyment, that's good. But in terms of, presenting to people and getting people involved, I think it's still useful. I think the way we do it is good. I think reading in the case of our current text reading book of the Bible, Psalms, the Greek and Hebrew, it gives us more information not only from the text, but also understanding of the different texts, the histories of the different texts, and some of the differences, whether they be additions or subtractions or just stylistic presentations of basically the same information or material. Now, it took me a little longer to get ready for this text reading because as I started doing it, and this happened in some of the earlier Psalms text readings, and I talked about it, how I had to do some corrections. I had to do some changes in the numbering sequence. That I've gone through some of the material in the Book of Psalms when I was doing my day text that turned into text readings and stuff. Started back on Twitter and things, but I've talked about before the whole history of the day text and text readings and translating the Bible outside of apologetic discussions. So, I've gone through a lot of different books. I've completed several, some of the smaller letters of the New Testament. I've completed the book of Proverbs by my most significant completion in terms of content, material, and the involvement of the text, right? Trying to align. It was very challenging, as you'll see, but it wasn't just getting it lined up right, and of course translating it and noting all the differences and giving you a system whereby you would be able to recognize in the Greek, in the Hebrew, what might have more or less material, and then what that material is, right? Very useful, I think. I think it would be incredibly helpful to a lot of people. I hope it will be. But I had to do a lot of renumbering to get everything in alignment so you can look across the page, and that's what's happening. It's almost totally done, ready for printing. But in the same way, the book of Psalms has issues like that. It has issues with numbering that I had to work out. So I haven't gone through it, like I said, the way I've gone through Proverbs, right? With Proverbs, I've not just gone through it once. I've gone through it numerous times, edited it, and spent the bulk of my translation time on it, at least over the past 5 years for sure. And with Psalms, these other books, right, I haven't gone through them as much. So it's still somewhat raw in that way. Now, when I first go through any book like this, I try to get it right and number it the right way. But even when it's numbered the right way, it varies from other more popular numbering systems. And so I've finally figured out a way where I can just adopt one numbering system completely based on the translated texts, not trying to align anything with what you might be more used to. And again, this will only affect certain books, but I'm going to do what I think is correct based on the text that I'm translating. And that's just what I'm going to do. And that's may not always line up with the traditional numbering system, but you maybe be one or two verses off, because any others, like I said, in the Greek text, which is kind of out of alignment in terms of how we tend to look at things, but still consistent when you line it up properly in most cases. And so that's what I've done with Psalms. I found recently in going through it that I had some of the numbering wrong just in trying to line things up. I didn't have the Greek numbering correct. And I tried to show both numberings, but I didn't have it done the way it needed to be done. And I realized that back when I was doing probably 2 text readings ago in Psalms. So, the earlier Psalms material may still have some numbering sequences in my translation and text readings, and that's okay. If so, I can correct that. Although there wasn't as much, I think, in the earlier text readings. And then I haven't gotten to some of the later Psalms material that I went through once already. I'll have to check that numbering. I'm going to do each chapter at this point now that I'm aware of what I need to correct. I'm making those corrections going forward. I made them in the last several Psalms text readings we've done. I'll have to go back to the earliest ones and make sure, and then I will do it as we proceed. So I would, if I were you, if you're keeping track of my translation to date on the Christian Witnesses of Jaho discussion forum, if you have access to that, I'll start opening access to it again as soon as possible. It just takes a lot of time, and a lot of people come in at one time, and a lot of people want to talk about a lot of different things that we've either already talked about or that require some monitoring. And we have a good community in there now. They're pretty just passive, and they're utilizing the things that are together with this channel and other materials, of course, but mainly on the discussion forum, my translations. That's the main thing there. And just seeing other people from different places in the earth, and you can find a board for that. But I haven't really approved any membership on that forum for probably almost a year, because I just don't have the time, and I have to give my time to other things. And so I like it the way it is now. We'll try to open it up more soon, so you can at least have access. More people can have access to my translations. And then I post updates, like earlier today, I posted on the board where my translations are that I made some changes to Psalms. So what I would do now, what you see in the description below in this video, that's all edited and up to date, and now mirrors what's on my translation for the Psalms on the CW Jaho discussion forum. I have to keep everything up, my offline translation, my description feed, and then of course the CW Jaho discussion forum. Whenever I change one thing, I have to change them all. So they're always in sync. My save copy, what I put here, what I use in my videos, and then what's on the online forum. And of course, when I print something, Proverbs will be a little different. You'll see when you get it, printed copy, but it'll be very efficient. Yeah, I think you'll like it, and hopefully get a lot of good use out of it. And the appendix, I think a lot of you will love. There's actually a couple appendices, but either way, we'll talk about that another time. But I finally got it all in there. I got all the Psalms right, so we're going to get to it. Took me a little longer. But I also completed, I had one text in Psalm 69 or 68 in the Greek, as you'll see. Verse 5, I did not have translator. Verse 4, again, there's a little variance there. It's clearer now that as I go through it, but I'll point it out as we read. You'll kind of see how I've done it in addition to what you've seen to this point. But I've made even a few more changes because I realize I have a few sections I need to account for in Psalms that just are broken up differently in the source material, Rolf's, right, or BHS for the Hebrew, Aramaic. So, all right, let's go ahead and get to our text reading. And I'll bring up what we're going to use. I'm going to be using my translation, of course, we've been discussing. I'm most familiar with it. I'm prepared to answer for it. And if you want to use something else, that's fine. But I use what I know best to the extent that I've translated it. And we'll go ahead and bring that online. Actually, I'll go ahead and just formally introduce this. I may just keep the pre-material, but I may cut it. It's a series, so sometimes the pre-show isn't as informative or necessary. In which case, I just cut it right where I introduce it and keep it a little bit more formal. Okay. Welcome to Text Readings with Greg Stafford. It's our most important, but least popular video series. I'm kidding. Actually, I'm not, right? If you know in the pre-show we were talking about it. I've talked about it before, right? And I don't really mean that. I think everybody has to pick a certain level of videos, but I like I was saying earlier, definitely there's something going on with the views of the text readings, which seem to me to be the most critical in one respect. Again, maybe we just all have a little bit different interests. Who knows? Either way, I try to make them informative, even though they involve reading, because again, we're getting our most important beliefs from these texts. Well, there's a lot more to it, and there's more than even these texts. This is the stuff we need to know, right? So reading it, keeping it in our minds, understanding some of the technical differences and difficulties, and complementing and recommendable features, that's very important, I think, for at least some of us. And that's enough for me. All right, let me get back to it. I was literally kidding earlier when I did that. Good to see you, Henry. All right, here we go. Welcome to Text Readings with Greg Stafford, where we take a look at ancient biblical books to the extent that I've translated them to date. And we're currently reading my translations from the book of Psalms. Tonight we're going to be reading from Psalms chapter 41, 49, and 69. That's according to the Hebrew text. In the Septuagint or Greek translation of the Hebrew text, which dates to about several hundred years before our Common Era. Although there were more than one Greek translation, there's believed to have been a more official one, or at least a part of the Hebrew Scriptures, and then of other books thereafter, including the Psalms. So in my translation, I'm presenting the Greek and Hebrew, or Aramaic and Greek in some cases, so that you can see the way that what the text says is presented in both of or all three of the primary biblical languages that we are most familiar with, right? There's other language texts, Latin, Syriac, and many others. But for the most part, people are used to the text for the Old Testament in Hebrew and Aramaic. And the Greek translation, even people who aren't familiar like with the Septuagint as a document or a translation collection of the Bible, like Brenton's or something like that, or Rolf's, of course, even less so, they still know about the Septuagint because in the New Testament, right, it's the Septuagint, the Greek translation, is quoted frequently, or Greek translations are made frequently, consistent with the accepted Greek translation of the Old Testament. So, having both of those for source material on the same page is what I'm presenting and what we're going to read here tonight. Let's go ahead and take a look at the text reading. Now, there are some numbering issues, and I talked a little bit about this in my pre-show, and I'm pretty much done with, well, I am done with the book of Proverbs. I'm in the final editing, about to send to the printer, Jaho willing. I'll let you know when it's finally ready to be sent out. I'll show it right here on the video. But it took a lot of work, a lot of preparation, and I believe it is hopefully a helpful contribution to the documents in the Bible and to the discussion of Jah and the beliefs that we have from it. So when, I've gone through other books, right? We've spent a lot of time in Genesis, Exodus. We're about to go into Proverbs, but I've done that on my own. Probably more than any other book, I've spent time with Proverbs. It involves both the Greek and Hebrew. A lot of renumbering, but that can be, and that I have done in a way that I think will allow you to see basically as if they were presented consistently. Same with the book of Psalms to a different degree. There were some numbering issues that I just recently had to correct because I'm still heavily editing my online translation of Psalms to date. But I've gone through it once and in several texts several times, but once in a very formal translation setting. And in doing these text reading videos, I've gone through it again, one of the advantages of doing these text readings, and it allows me to see things both a second time and also to make any corrections I missed the first time. And I noticed some of the numbering of the Psalms that we've been doing recently, including this text reading, were not correct. So I had to change all that. I had to translate one Hebrew text that I had left untranslated. It was a difficult text. I translated the Greek, but now I remember at the time I didn't have a lot of time, and the text involved some grammatical features that I needed to do some further studying and evaluation of to make sure I understood the sense correctly and the different ways that it could be expressed and the best way that I thought to express it. So I did that. I put everything online, everything in the description below. It's all up to date for this text reading. Nothing's final, of course, till I publish it. But in any case, I've gone through this text readings material very thoroughly a second time, and the last two text readings thoroughly a second time. I may still have to make some changes in the numbering of the earlier text reading videos and some of the ones we still have to do in Psalms. But at least I've gotten this middle part updated again. I've made some necessary numbering corrections, and it will make the Psalms as a translation document that much better. And a text reading for us. So, Psalm 41, or 40 in the Greek, right? So, I put the regular number, or the number that it is for most of us reading a translation of the Old Testament Psalms without parentheses. And then I put the one that, so if you were reading a copy or a translation or Rolf's edition of the Septuagint, it wouldn't be in Psalm 41. It would be in Psalm 40. Okay? And this will all be explained in my printed editions, but some of those are still ways away, and I want you to understand what I'm doing here, right? What I'm indicating, why some of these numbers, why was there 40 and 41? Okay? Well, now you know. And so here in this opening verse, right, we'll call it verse 1 of Psalm 41 Hebrew, 40 Greek. You can see here we've got Hebrew, right? The H stands for Hebrew and the G for Greek, the capital G. And in the Hebrew, what I do, for those of you who may be new, right? So if we just jump down to 49, 48 real quick, if you look at Hebrew 7 and Greek 7, I put the Hebrew and the Greek side by side here, this way. It's different in my printed editions. They're across the page. But here I put them right next to each other, so we'll read them together, and we'll be able to see any differences. I italicize text differences, like if there's a difference in the material of either text, Greek or Hebrew. But if it's just a more expressive or less expressive way of saying the same thing, that's not something I mark or indicate with the italics or plus or minuses. So I don't think we have any of that tonight, any plus or minus material. But what we do have here, like I was explaining, if you look, I'm explaining it now because as we start reading, I'm just going to keep reading it. The first verse in the Hebrew has all of the text that in the Greek text is in the first two verses. All right, so what I did, right, in the chapter heading, I put the Hebrew verse in just non-parentheses, right, 41. And then I put the Greek chapter in parentheses. So you know, okay, if it doesn't match the Greek that you're reading in chapter 41, go to 40. That's where it is. And then for verse 1, I put 1a and 1b outside of parentheses. And I don't do that when there's a variance too often, right? Because we don't get this a lot, where we have basically two verses for one. It's very infrequent, I would say. We do get more or less text material, and we do get out of sequence numbering, verses that say basically the same thing, but they're not in the same sequence, chapter or verse. But here we get, by comparison, a more infrequent phenomenon, and that is what in the Hebrew is one verse, in the Greek is two verses. The first part, this is the first verse of the Septuagint's chapter 40 of the Psalms. It's 1a in my view. And then it's in verse 2, this is the part in the Greek, right? I put it as 1b because both of these together equal the one of the Hebrew. And it may be a little confusing right now. And again, this is rare. We're going to read it. And otherwise, as you're going to see, right, what if, for example, this verse 1 was similar to verse 2, I would have just put a 1 here, indicating it's verse 1 of the Hebrew, but verse 2 of the Greek, right? Because that's what we have in verse 2. We have verse 2, Hebrew, but in the Greek it's verse 3. Why? Because verse 1 is split up into 2. It's just the way it is. But as you see, the way I've done it here, that should make it clear to you, right? Both based on the numbering and more so the way I've grouped them together. Now, in my translation, the way I've done it with Proverbs, and probably how I'll do it with all multi-language books, translations of books, they're right across the page. And sometimes, often, almost every page, to achieve that, I had to space them apart in a way that just allows it to happen. This is not an equal way to do it because the text material is not equally distributable based on a spacing of one size. It would not line up correctly. So I had to customize the spacing in between sections of verses on almost every page multiple times. But that's good, right? Because that's how I want. That way you can look across and boom, boom, boom. Everything lines up. I think you'll like it. All right, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and do our text reading. Psalm 41, Hebrew, verse 1. To the one coordinating the music, here is a song of David. Happy is the one who gives attention to the poor or to the lowly. Because during a day of distress or a day of evil, Jaho will deliver him. Or Jaho, right? We use anglicized forms of names like Jesus, Jeremiah, Jacob, Isaac, right? We speak English. Many people don't seem to understand that or seem to think the Bible's like anti-English or anti any other pronunciation of ancient biblical names. Show me a text that says that. Doesn't exist. So you should just say the name according to the best available evidence and stop complaining about it when it's in the language of the people who are talking. Unless you just don't want to deal with things that matter, right? Verse 1, Greek translation 1a. For the finale, a song to or for David. It's in the dative case here in the Greek, and that translation just makes more sense to me. It's not like taking it in a worshipful way, but it just is a song that's representative of what David would want to hear. Whereas in the Hebrew, it's a song that is seemingly of David, that's David made up for this purpose. In the Greek, it seems to me more so that it's for David based on what he would want to hear or say himself or has said or both, right? Combination of both. Verse 1b or 2 in the Greek, happy is the one, or the second part of the Hebrew, right? Happy is the one with understanding for the poor and for the needy. During a bad or evil day, the Lord Jaho will deliver or rescue him. We're going to come back and we'll go over it again and just talk about it briefly. So let's just keep reading. Verse 2, chapter 41, Hebrew. Jaho will closely watch the one who gives attention to the poor, and he will preserve that one alive. The one giving attention to the poor will be made to become blessed in the earth, and you will not be able to give him over to the desires of his enemies. Verse 2 or 3 in the Greek translation. Chapter 41 Hebrew, chapter 40 Greek translation. May Lord Jaho protect him, and may he keep that one alive, and may he bless him in the earth, and may he not give him over into the hands of his enemies. Chapter 49 Hebrew text, chapter 48 Greek text, verse 7 Hebrew text, translation. Those who are trusting in their own strength. Those who are trusting in their own strength. I don't know, it just made me think of the, Watchtower is again claiming, right? I talked about it in my last video. Watchtower, God's people, or, false teachers, false prophets. And I've talked about before, I talked about it in my one of Joe's Witnesses who doesn't support the Watchtower. About Garrett Loesch, and I showed the video in that last video I referenced, where he says that, God and Jesus completely trust the faithful and discreet slave, so why don't we trust them, right? Well, number one, they're calling themselves the faithful and discreet slave. That's something that the master does after he arrives and determines whether or not they've done so. And then he points them over everything. And according to Jesus, right, I mean, if the symbology is equivalent at all to the ruling with him on his Father's throne, that hasn't happened. Right? Even the society has some kind of view of how, they don't have possession of everything. But they've been approved. And you don't have anywhere near, right? You're not a point over, it doesn't seem like you have very much authority, other than what you're basically forcing through, punishments or difficulties, right? There's no persuasion of any kind of loving kind. It's not like facts. It's some of these things you're asking us to do, like completely trust you, something we're explicitly told not to do. We're told not to even trust in our own strength right here. So is the faithful and discreet slave not doing that? They're trusting in themselves. Now they're claiming God and Jesus trust them, right? Did God and Jesus tell them that? Did God and Jesus somehow communicate to them that we completely trust you? You keep making all these mistakes and you're misleading a lot of people, and we didn't tell you to teach all this stuff that's not correct, but we completely trust you. You're doing fine. We need to stop that, okay? It's just like the Trinitarians' Watchtower. Sometimes, they go nuts or act in certain ways, right? We know who would be a good example of that. And it turns a lot of people off. When you watch how people keep telling us to do these things, they're explicitly spoken of against in the Bible. Completely trust you? What? So now we have Stephen Lett saying exactly the same thing. I may do a video about it. It's terrible. I just couldn't believe it. He says that God and Jesus fully trust the slave. It's almost exactly like what Loesch said. So why shouldn't we? Well, God and Jesus fully. Oh, yeah, why not? You, of course, you just said so, right? Yeah. So why wouldn't I do that? I don't know, because you've done a lot of things in the past that don't indicate that is really happening, and that you telling me that when the Bible says that that is something I shouldn't do, there's another indication that there's a problem. So, right? You trust in your own. They're trusting in their own strength. And in the abundance of wealth will boast of their self confidence, right? Now, I don't know if they necessarily do that, and I don't want to make this a Watchtower show, but certainly they do often talk about different aspects of materiality that may qualify here. And a lot of groups do at times. Not everyone, though. Certainly not. The ones who have perished, Greek translation, verse 7. The ones who have perished, the ones who have persuaded, on the basis of their power, and those who are boasting in the abundance of their riches. Verse 8, Hebrew translation, see, or alas, Hebrew, ach, which can also mean brother. There is nothing to offer in ransom. Even if one offers a man as a ransom, he cannot give to God the price of his life. Verse 8, Greek translation, chapter 49 Hebrew, chapter 48 Greek, a brother cannot redeem. Will he redeem a man? He will not give to God his ransom. So if a brother can't redeem, watch out, people talking to you right now. And so why would we trust anyone completely? They can't redeem. So what are they going to do? Exactly what does it mean to completely trust them? Like do everything they say? Like, pretty much, right? Believe everything they teach? Pretty much, right? Can't you see the danger? It takes a little while, as I said before, more or less for everyone, because exposure to teachings over a period of time, different family relations, different associations. But we're reading these texts, and it's talking about things so far involving the poor and Jaho giving attention to the poor, and how we're happy when we take care of the poor and the needy. Right, verse 1 and 2 or 3, depending on how they're numbered here, right? So we'll keep that one alive, Jaho. We'll give you attention, the poor will become blessed in the earth. Don't, and then verse 7 of chapter 49, 48, don't trust in our own confidence or in the abundance of wealth. Helping the poor, taking care of the needy. We'll go ahead and just kind of break a little bit. We'll just talk about some of this stuff so that at the end we'll wrap it up instead of going back, like we are now. We're already here, so let's just keep it going. At this point, we can see the emphasis on the poor and the needy, right? It's all throughout the New Testament, too. That's all throughout the activities of Jesus. How much of that do we do, right? It doesn't mean we can go out and save every person who's down on their luck, or, that everyone out there who's asking for money because they claim to be poor when they otherwise look healthy are someone we should be supporting. But what it does mean is that those closest to us, if they are in genuine need and we're not taking care of them, well, maybe our priorities are a little messed up, or at least helping to the extent where we won't become in need ourselves, right? That wouldn't be very helpful. In the same way, we should also be looking to help others outside of the people we know if we are sure that they're really in need, right? That you can tell they need some help right there, and we just turn our back on them. Well, we all have to answer for that someday. The emphasis here is clear, though, is it not? What kind of people is Jehovah looking for? What kind of people is Jah seeking to bless? This is not that hard to find, right? You're not going to find the God Jah at too many arguments or debates with various people. Maybe occasionally where it's necessary and where it really gives him glory and representing the truth well, but constantly, where it's already been done, and where people are blaspheming him and his name and his son? I don't think so. Not when we could be giving our time and attention to people that his son spent time with, right? I think that's a big clue right there as to what the Father likes. No one can redeem anyone. We shouldn't be trusting in anybody. That's absolutely against biblical teaching. That has to stop, Watchtower people. You have to stop them right now. If you can't stop them right now, well, do the best you can. I don't want you to lose your faith completely just because you've tied your faith to some extent, if not completely, to these people who want you to trust them completely. So if you do have your faith associated with them and you trust them completely, and that will fail, when it does fail, what happens then? Right. This is the danger that I'm concerned about, why I make this an issue. I mean, I think you guys are looking at like, why is he talking about us again? Well, what are you guys saying? Stop saying those things. I'm not the one talking about people completely trusting me or anybody, nor should you be, especially after the things you've taught that are not true. It's ridiculous. It makes us look ridiculous. We don't need to create problems for ourselves. You want to help? Stop talking about things you're not even supposed to be writing about. We already know. Thief in the night. We'll be ready, okay? Doors locked. Windows sealed. We're up. We get it. Alarm set. We'll be ready. You can stop writing about that stuff now. Can you stop asking people to trust you, please? Just stop. Just end it right now. You stop all that. Start promoting the Bible. And let's see what happens. If you can do those two things, right? Stop talking about the end times. Stop talking about prophecies and chronologies and things that aren't explicitly told to us in the text. And stop telling people to completely trust you. I mean, those seem to be pretty clear to me, right? You don't need anything to be written about you. You know neither the date and the time. You're not applying the 7 times for Daniel 4 correctly at all, right? It's very clear. They're applied themselves in the text, just like other prophecies in Daniel about the Messiah, Jerusalem, the walls. So, you know what? Do we just believe you because you say so? The Bible doesn't say so, right? You're telling Trinitarians that they're supposed to believe the Bible, one God the Father. Trinitarians don't believe the Bible. They believe one God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Yet the Trinitarians claim to believe the Bible and even fight you over it. Because they accept their traditions and they want to be associated with the Bible, inspire their traditions. Watchtower people, you're doing the exact same thing. Different subject, different traditions. Different stakes to some extent, right? But if the Trinity's wrong, you think that's easy for the Trinitarians? Pretty much changes everything, right? Just like the Watchtower. You guys are both teaching these things, and all it is one God the Father, right? Can we just get back to that? Can we keep things kind of simple for everybody and stop talking about complete trust in humans and metaphysics about homoousios and councils involving false teachers, liars, and idolatrous pagan emperors, promoting false gods and going to war and using an idol related to Christ to do so? There's just certain things I think we should be able to get past if we want to. If we don't, well, Watchtower people, you go ahead, then you do what you got to do. Trinitarians, whatever. We're going back to these texts. Verse 9, chapter 4:9 Hebrew. For even though a man will be deemed valuable as a ransom for his soul or life, that's an intensive plural of dignification, even he will come to an end in the future. Right? Even if you are valuable, even if someone could be trustworthy to some extent, right? What does Paul say? What did Peter do? What does Jesus tell us? Why do you call me good? Right? We know the Trinitarians completely collapse, can't figure it out, right? Well, he must be calling him God. No, that's exactly what he's telling you he's not doing. You can't read the text? Why don't you just listen to what he says and stop adding and changing his words? Like you do pretty much everywhere the term God is used, right? Why do you call me good? One is good, God. He's telling you right there he's not God. He's only doing what God tells him, which is what he tells us. One of the most frequently stated things, and Trinitarians still can't figure it out. He explicitly states the Father's one working through him. It's not even his words. It's just here. He's complying because he accepts that it's the right thing to do. So we don't have to collapse over it. Just because Jesus says, look, it's not me. It's the Father. You're calling me good. Okay. Yeah, but it's the Father. The Father's the one who's doing this. The Father's the one who's talking. I'm not the Father. I'm the Son, firstborn. Oh, you guys know Son, firstborn. I know. Right. Sometimes it can have a figurative, right? If it's like talking about a nation or my Father placing. Well, we know there's a couple times like that. But everywhere else, right? And the explicit definition, Deuteronomy 21:17, right? And clearly it's not applied figuratively to me, so it's very clear. Son of God, right? But the Father is working through me right here, right? This is not my will. This is all explicit stuff. No one can contradict this. We all know it's true. And yet Trinitarians can't figure it out. It's incredible, right? So, yeah, we have to recognize it won't matter. Some people are going to believe their traditions no matter what. And if we're not careful, that can happen to us as well. We have to constantly be checking ourselves, just like the Bible says, verse 9, Greek text, chapter 48, Greek, 49, Hebrew, even the price for the ransoming of his soul. Now, that's where verse 9 ends. So I may have to do a little changing here, probably add a plus or minus or do something similar to what I did here. Because it's not so simple. It depends on what the rest of this says. I put a comma there, and I did look at it briefly, but I didn't get into it translationally because other than the one verse I did, actually the next one coming up, I didn't have time to get into the Psalms, like I did with Proverbs right now. I did take time, and I actually went through this whole section and the last couple sections pretty carefully because the numbering was off. And I have to fix that as fast as possible. So I did spend some good time with a lot of this here. But I may still change a few things, so we'll see. Either way, as you can see, this is sort of left there. So we'll move on to chapter 69. This should be 68 Greek. And it's the same verses, but it's just like with chapter 49, 48. Different chapter, same verse numbering. Rolf's and VHS, the Hebrew text. Chapter 69, verse 5, Hebrew text. This is the text I had to translate that I hadn't done yet. It was missing from this section of text. Those hating me without reason have become many, more than the hairs of my head. Those who are trying to destroy me have become strong. The ones who are mistreating me with deception. What I had not stolen, I began to return. In other words, even when it wasn't his or her fault, right? It could apply to a person, a female as well. The person is trying to return. That's how much the person is trying to deal with or make better the situation. And yet it doesn't matter. They're lying. They deceive. They just don't like him. Verse 5, Greek translation, those who hated me without cause were made to multiply more than the number of hairs on my head. My enemies, those who are constantly distressing me without justice, became strong. I did not even carry off those things I was paying for at the time. Verse 6, Hebrew translation, God, you yourself have known my stupidity and my sins, and from you they have not been concealed. Verse 6, Greek translation, God, you understood, or you knew my stupidity, and my shortcomings were not hidden from you. Verse 7, Hebrew translation, may those hoping in you not become ashamed on my account, O Lord Jaho, with spirit warriors. May those who seek you not become dishonored because of me, O God of Israel. Verse 7, Greek translation, Lord Jaho, let those who are enduring for your sake not become ashamed because of me, O Lord Jaho of great powers. Let those who are earnestly seeking you not become ashamed of me, God of Israel. Verse 8, Hebrew translation, for because of you I have carried disgrace, the taunt of the enemy. Shame has covered my face. Verse 8, Greek translation, because for your sake I endured insults or reproaches. Shame covered my face. I think I actually did change this to be the same grammatically there, so I'll go ahead and do that now. I know I did. I didn't see any really point. I think it should be a semicolon. I think this is more related to this part than a completely separate sentence. would make it seem to be. So use a semicolon there. Verse 9, Hebrew translation, I have become divided against my brothers, and I have become a foreigner to the sons of my mother. Verse 9, Greek translation, I became one who has been made to be a stranger to my brothers, and a foreigner to the sons of my mother. Verse 10, Hebrew translation, because passion or zeal for your house has consumed me, and the taunts, I hear one of the cats there, the taunts of the enemies who are reproaching you have fallen upon me. Verse 10, Greek translation, because passion or zeal for your house has consumed me, and the insults of those reproaching you fell upon me. And as we know, it's a messianic psalm here, specifically, this last text and several of these texts. And we will be discussing the messianic texts, right? But which pretty much, I would say, in this text reading, comprise this material. We'll check the rest of the material following to make sure that we add it if necessary. But it's a little bit different, right, than some of these themes here. Although you might apply some or all of verse 7. I don't know. You can apply a lot of this in some ways messianically if you wanted to, just because it fits with Jesus in a general sense, right? For example, what I had not stolen, I began to return. So, for example, the Roman coin that was presented to him as a test wasn't his money. He didn't take it. And what did he do? He basically said to give it back. I think you could apply that in a sense to Jesus. And I don't know, this part here. This is more, David or the person, right? Because David obviously had that. David speaking of himself in ways that are ultimately messianic because he's the king and because he's dealing with Michael, the Prince of Israel, and being used as the one through whose line he would be born and identifiable relative to these things. But it's still David, right? Or for David, if you look at it in the Septuagint sense, that the opening of at least verse 41, but, moving on to chapter 69, there's parts of this here where David is David, right? And he's still speaking messianically, even though he's also talking about himself. We have to be able to differentiate when he does that. And so we'll take a look at these things and how they uniquely apply to Jesus in one sense, just like I was talking about right here. But even more so in these kinds of ways, right? When he entered into the temple and saw everybody basically making the house of his father's worship a place of business. I think everybody should reflect on that, right? We can't all do things for free or provide everything for free, but when we come together, do we really have to do business? Do whatever you want, you'll answer for it. But I mean, when we talk about the Messiah and Jesus, I think there's a time and place for things, and I think we should be as far away or far removed in our association together and in our collective worship from anything involving money or making money while we're doing that. Knowing how the Messiah fulfilled this text, right? The way he reacted more aggressively probably than in any way when he was presented with what he saw. And the way it struck him at that moment. So knowing how far things have fallen can sometimes stir us up. No question about it. We can become strangers to even those who we're related to fleshly, in a fleshly sense, or spiritually. People we may have at one time thought were spiritually, brothers and sisters. People who actually believe in the same God in Christ and who are willing to stand with us and defend worshiping them and following them the way we're supposed to, no matter what. But who have instead given their loyalty, their trust, their complete trust to people you're not supposed to trust. That's not the will of the Father. Show me that. Show us that. Show us that Jesus or God completely trusts any humans, anywhere. The appointment of the faithful slave, you're just applying that to yourself. You're just saying you were appointed. Well, Jesus didn't say that. He didn't manifest that and punish the wicked slave that wasn't found faithful. You're just making all that up. There was nothing that occurred in 1919 that would in any way fit what he's talking about. He's talking about arriving and finding out whether or not someone proved themselves faithful. It's the judgment. It's what determines whether or not you're accepted. Whether or not he carries you away in the clouds, or whether or not he approves you as the sheep that go into the new earth, the nations. So, I think it's important for us to do what is taught explicitly in the Bible and to rely on as little, if any, interpretation as possible. Why do we need to interpret so many things if it's so clear, right? Some things may be culturally, historically, difficult, so we have to figure it out. But, for the most part, if we can't explicitly understand it for what it says, we shouldn't be requiring people to believe it. And if it doesn't say what you say we have to believe, and it does say what we say we should believe, that's pretty much what it boils down to, right? Who's going to accept what it says? Any one of us can claim the Bible supports our teachings. What does it say? What does it explicitly teach? And what can we interpret it to mean in the context in which it was written? Not based on just someone believing they were appointed to interpret things they weren't even supposed to be writing about, all while identifying most of the people who agree with them as a group that's not even here yet for over about 100 years now. So, I think there are times like when it says here, you become divided against your brothers, your mother, the sons of your mother. Just like Jesus, right? Was Jesus received by everybody? No. It took a long time for even his own family to accept him. Certainly, those who were representing his father didn't accept him. And it was a group of people that didn't appear to be acceptable at all that were chosen to be with him. So there's no doubt this text finds fulfillment in him. We'll talk about it more in our text reading video. Our pre-Christian evidence that Jesus is the biblical Messiah series that we'll be getting back to probably in the next couple of weeks. I've got several videos actually on a number of different subjects. Early Christian writers, Bible and the Trinity and conflict, divine name. I'm just trying to, I've had so many on the list, and then I'm trying to get some of them developed in a way that I think will give you what you want to hear and what I haven't already covered, or do a text we haven't covered, like with the Trinity discussion or issue. So it's coming together. We'll be doing one tomorrow. I'll put a notice up. I hope all of you will be able to join me. If not, you can watch the video later. But it should be a good show. So I'll put that notice up tomorrow, and then I'll see you again maybe throughout the week with some uploads, and then we'll be back again soon with another text reading from Psalm.